we currently require that we currently accept the best composite sitting. ACT has recently changed their advice on what some call super scoring or taking the best individual subsections. My understanding is that doing so might cost us some validity, but with so many things up in the air, we may also have to review that question.
Welcome everyone. My name is Eric Ellefson. I am a high school and college high school counselor with a focus on academic and college counseling at Valley Christian High School in San Jose, California. I'm with friends, Rob Schwartz from Premier College Guidance, also instructor at UCLA's College Counseling Certificate Program, Trevor Mizrahi, who is president of Premier College Guidance, and then Kirk Brennan, the Associate Dean, Director of Undergraduate Admissions at University of Southern California. And what we wanted to do as we were putting this together is we just wanted to put together an opportunity to talk about the changing college admissions landscape, perspectives from the college side as well as high school side of things. And to kick us off, I'm going to turn it over to Rob Schwartz. Rob, take us away.
Thanks, buddy. Can you go ahead and start the next slide?
Yeah, if I can get there. Yeah.
Well, I've called my presentation Staying in Your Lane. Coronavirus has changed some things, but not everything. And here's the reality. This sucks. This sucks for you. This sucks for me. This sucks for my family. This sucks for everyone who is providing information tonight in their presentation. It sucks for pretty much everyone who's stuck at home. But that doesn't mean we should be necessarily laser focused on what's going to happen in the next few weeks or the next few months or even the next year. If you're tuning in and you're a high school junior, a high school sophomore, a high school freshman, you have a much, much larger landscape that you want to be thinking about. And yes, some things have changed, maybe irrevocably. And then there's other things that they really haven't changed all that much. So with that said, I want to take you through what I'm seeing as changes and what I'm seeing is status quo, and where you might want to be thinking you need to be. So with that, go ahead and advance the next slide, Eric. So what has changed? This is one where families, they get stuck. Oh my gosh, standardized testing. It is the biggest thing in the universe. It isn't. Don't let it become the big thing that really isn't. However, based on coronavirus, testing has moved to a test optional phase at most US schools. Not all of them. The UCs have, the CSUs have. We'll hear from USC in a moment and they'll talk about where they're going to be. That said, there are a significant number of highly selective colleges that have not changed. So I want you to be aware that there are still a lot of high-end schools. When I say high-end, I mean those that are very, very selective. They admit fewer than 25% of the students who apply. A number, not all, but a number of them have kept to their requirement for SAT or ACT. So be on the lookout for those policies. And if you're a junior right now and you're thinking of applying to one of those schools, please make sure you are looking at the available SAT and ACT test dates between the summer and the end of the application window towards the end of this year. You're going to still need an SAT or ACT for a handful, literally a handful of schools. Schools are in the process of deciding if they're going to open on-ground classes in the fall. Based on what I read just a few days ago, the overwhelming majority of schools that have reported are planning to open regular, I'm using regular in quotes now, are planning to open with on-ground classes. A couple of Cal State universities have come out and stated they will for sure begin running online in the fall. My gut feeling tells me that the overwhelming majority of California public schools and probably New York State public schools will open in this similar fashion. I'm guessing a lot of private schools and a lot of schools where they're not seeing as many cases are going to do everything they can to open with normalcy as much as normalcy permits, because there's a lot riding on it for these institutions. A need to have access to technology and knowledge of technology to write, research, and communicate. This is not just a student change. This honestly is more about your professors. I know this because I have a professor living in my home. My wife, Lisa, is a college instructor, and she was told from, a day in March to 3 days from now, wow, you need to put everything you've done for your students in an on-ground format online. For all of your students who are at home who are dealing with this problem, and you're thinking this is what online education is? No, this is not traditional online education. This is, oh my God, we have an emergency, throw something up on a screen so we can say we're teaching you. That is not what this is going to look like come the fall. If we need to be in that format, you're going to see an improvement, but you're also going to need the technology and the access to technology to be able to keep up with your classroom assignments. College finances. Maybe Kirk will talk about this, maybe he won't. It's totally up to him to decide. Colleges are hurting financially. This is no secret. Before coronavirus, we were looking at 1 in 4 US institutions was running in the red, meaning they were running a deficit. That number is at least 50% now. There are major land grant universities that are running hundreds of millions of dollars in the hole now. This is going to change things, perhaps for the better for you, the consumer. There are going to be schools that change the way they reach out to you. There's going to be changes to their goals in terms of their target populations. Maybe for some schools, they might actually offer more aid to a certain population. In many other instances, they're going to offer less merit aid. This will be on a case-by-case basis. But what I am imagining is you're going to see admission percentages are going to tick up at most, not all, but at most colleges in this country because of a number of different factors. One of which being, we want to make sure as colleges, we're seeing as much money as we can and we're filling every seat we possibly can, whether that's live or online or in some sort of hybrid capacity. Another thing that I'm hearing from my own clients, more and more families are rethinking sending their kids far from home. This is something I want you to be thinking about very, very carefully. If you have a student who's a senior who's just decided on a college, I can definitely understand why in the near term, you might be drawn to a school closer to home. It's a much different proposition to say, oh my gosh, if we have to go home and we have another coronavirus outbreak, which I'm going to tell you is probably going to happen, it's easier to get home from an hour or 2 or 3 via your car than 3 or 4 or 5 hours and an international airport across the country. So we're starting to see a shift in behavior. That's something I'm expecting. Here's another part of this whole financial position shift by colleges. There's a financial shift by you and me, Joe Public. How many of our businesses have been affected? How many of us have been laid off? How many of us have been furloughed? How many of us have taken pay cuts? Sizable part of the population. And so families are looking at the cost of college saying, well, it was already tough before. Well, now what? Well, what's this going to do in the long term? And I think this is an important point for everyone listening. There's going to be an influx of students that move into the community college system simply because cost requires it. Here in California, you've got the promise. The first year is covered, it's free. So it's an extremely inexpensive way to get your college education started. Is that necessarily the right move? No, not necessarily. There are students who really should be going directly to a 4-year institution. And there are those who really should be going to a community college. But just do the math in your mind. Think about this for a moment. If you are looking at this population and a larger and larger position shift over to community college and a smaller number go to 4-year schools, what's going to happen 2 to 3 years from now when that population, that swelled community college population, wants to transfer 4-year schools? I think what you're going to see is for the next couple of years, you're going to see admission percentages at many 4-year schools uptick. Simultaneously, a couple of years from now, you're going to see downticks for the first time in many years from community colleges to the 4-year university. It will, in fact, reverse its roles. So be mindful of the following. You always have that plan B option in the community college. If you decide to go for it and try to get into the four-year schools of your dreams, and you've done your homework and you really understand what you're buying and you understand why they're a great fit and you know the programming you're getting and you apply and you're denied, go to community college. Push the reset button, start over. Let's see where it takes you in 2, maybe 3 years. But go for it and at least find out if you could get in the front door and if the price is right. Thank you, Bob Barker. Most summer programs have or will be canceled. What can be done about this? Well, in terms of the actual summer programming, the answer is nothing. What can be done to supplant those opportunities is the real question. So for a number of my families, I have recommended massive open online courses or MOOC classes. There's a list that I've sent out to my families. I think there's 450 MOOC classes taught by Ivy League instructors in 10 different categories. These are completely free. No strings attached, no questions asked. They want you to take the class, you're auditing it. This is a 0 credit class. But think about the opportunity. You're a student taking marketing from a professor at the Wharton School. You're taking a class on infectious diseases from someone at NYU or Columbia for free. Are you kidding me? Now, understand this is not something you're putting into your transcript. This is something you're listing as an extracurricular activity. And what I'm guessing, and Kirk is welcome to correct me as someone who works in admission, colleges like USC are looking for people who are interested in learning, who take classes and take on challenges and take on opportunities because they are motivated to learn, not motivated to generate credits, not motivated to generate a higher GPA. They want to know that you care about something and that there is evidence to support that. This is a great way to do that. And frankly, it's also a great way for you to be able to say, hey, I understand who I am and I understand who I want to be. Maybe you try one of these classes and it doesn't really work out. Maybe this is a great life-saving opportunity for you to not declare a major that might be a terrible fit for you, but you figured it out while you were still in high school. Visiting colleges, obviously much more challenging in the here and the now. Visiting a school in the summer might be a possibility, but what are you really going to see? Relatively speaking, an empty campus. So you're not getting a lot of value for that visit. I'm going to strongly recommend, if there is a window of opportunity in the fall, to start that visiting process. If you can't, you definitely want to do that before you sign on the dotted line. If you're a junior becoming a senior, get out and see these schools in the coming March, in the coming April. Get a clear sense of what you're buying, because there are huge differences between schools that have great brands and great names and great athletic programs, and you might love one and not like the other. You need to see it with your own eyes. As I said earlier, some good news. US schools are likely going to have higher admit rates than the year before. And as I've talked to many of my families, many more are utilizing their wait lists. Go ahead and go to the next screen, please. Eric, can you go ahead and switch the screen? Thank you. So what hasn't changed? Oh, one too many, pal. There we go. So don't panic. Please don't panic. Guys, the world itself may have changed quite a bit, but if we take a step back, and we take a step back, and we say, okay, 2, 3, 4 years from now, what is our world going to be in terms of college? The answer is not that different. So understand that you need to make sure you're taking care of your business and not worrying about what the rest of the world is doing. Your applications generally are not going to change. Colleges still want to understand who you are. They still want to understand you beyond your grades, and maybe they're asking for your test scores and maybe they're not. By the way, if you have a high test score, that's going to be better than no test score, free of charge. You need to be taking that time, like in a massive open online course, to get to know yourself. Are you really understanding what it is that motivates you, why it motivates you, how you've picked the colleges and universities you've ultimately selected to apply to? Can they see that in your application? And if they can't, You're making it harder for them to see you as successful on their college campuses. The college search and selection process should not change. If you're a good fit before coronavirus, you're gonna be a good fit after coronavirus. Make sure you are thinking about beyond the new normal and you're thinking about the actual normal, post-vaccine. If you're thinking, I really want to go to a school because it has a thriving athletic program like a USC, well, this fall, I'm guessing there isn't going to be much of an athletic program to discuss. But you know what? A year from now, I bet you there is. So think about the long term. Think about the experience you're getting long term. The timing of this process is unlikely going to change. I really hope it's not going to change. This was a tough enough year. Colleges and universities are still running tight schedules. As Mary Poppins might say, everything in its right place and time. So seniors, you need to have your applications ready to go if you're applying early by late October, if you're talking about a November EA or ED decision. A regular decision most of the time is going to occur in December or January. You want to make sure you are ready for that. If it's a Cal State or a UC, I'm not anticipating any changes to the November 30th deadline. So be ready in advance. If you're a student of mine, you're not sending me an essay November 27th saying, hey, Rob, can you take a look at this? No. We started this process in the summer so we can be ready to get things done safely and sanely. Okay? I know that was warp speed. I'm going to give you two very quick things that we're working on at Premier College Guidance, and I will clearly share more information with you if you email me, which is at the bottom of the screen. For those students who are looking for some additional help and hand-holding, but in a condensed period of time, Trevor, who you're going to hear from in a little while, and I are going to be launching our first college readiness boot camp, or what I'm calling the CRAB program. It'll be the week of July 27th. It's for Southern California residents only, and we will work with up to 12 students. That's it. This is not going to be a big program. There's a lot of hands-on attention, going over college admissions landscapes, talking about the process. We're going to try to tour some schools with people who actually know what they're doing as opposed to just walking around blindly on a campus. We're going to get presentations from people in engineering and medicine and business. You're going to get a financial aid presentation from Trevor. We're going to create college lists for students and teach them how to do good college research. God forbid. So all of this is available for families. If you want more information on pricing and timing, please email me, rob@premiercollegeguide.com. The second thing is something I just launched. It's called the Your College Insider Project, or the YCI project. If you're a business owner and you want to get free help, I said that, free help for your employees this year, give them webinar access, 6 different webinars that are live just for your employees, plus all sorts of additional information for free. Email me. I will send you all the details and share with you what we're doing. This is a brand new program. I'm excited about it, and I hope you'll take advantage of it. Again, I'll answer any questions you guys have at the end, but I have already gone a little bit over my time. So thank you for your attention. With that, let me turn this back over to Eric.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. And I won't be very long. I mean, I think what I wanted to do is just give a little bit of perspective, from inside the high school, and inside, our perspective on how we move forward and what we're suggesting our students to move forward in this process. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, I've been reading a lot of really interesting things, sharing those. I mean, I know a lot of that information is out there in unique ways. But a couple points that I'd like to make, and Rob already hit on them, but I think, what we've been telling our students and what we've been really focusing in on that I think could be helpful is, number one is this is a time to sit, reset your values, reset your outlook, and just kind of have an understanding of what matters to you as a student, what matters to you as a parent, what matters to you as a family. And to really kind of set the parameters for yourself in walking into the ambiguity of the future, based on what matters to you and what those values are. I think the second thing is that we've been telling our students is, I think I use it a little bit. Rob mentioned don't panic, and we want to make sure that in that not panicking, that we're patient yet we're persistent. I think sometimes in the patience, we can be too calm in some ways, and in the persistence, we can be over persistent in some ways and become pushy. And there is a place that, you know what, we want to be patient and allow some of this to unfold because we can't control it. We don't know. It's directed towards us and at us, and we become responsive. But in that persistence, we want to, clear a path and guide a path forward as we go. And in that, our third piece of advice to our students is to not waste this pause. Be a learner, be creative. There's so much in the way of virtual events and virtual opportunities. Rob talked about visiting campuses, and one of the questions earlier was about visiting campuses. And the virtual events I found to be incredibly helpful. Some of the colleges now are taking their students and making them available for opportunities, and then some others are just creating so much content that you have an opportunity to get to know a college and a university in a very different way, even without your feet on the ground. I think the other thing that we want to be is in that be a learner, be creative is not to miss the opportunities to be proactive. Because I think one of the things is we want to get into, and I had a conversation with a student and a family today where it was like, but, and the reminder is in this, but we're all in the same situation. And so as you remind yourself of this and you kind of create that path forward and you keep walking the steps and you make yourself aware and you're a learner, I think the biggest thing, and one of the encouragements I could give you is from the high school side of things, depending on your relationship with your counselor, is to just, I think in these days, be proactive and reaching out to your counselor. I know some schools are really good at reaching out to their students and connecting with them. And so in this situation, we just want to be proactive in connecting with our high school counselor so that then we can get clarity, we can ask the questions, we can dispel some of the confusion that's coming our way. So those are some of the things that I would say overall, big picture wise, that we want to keep an eye on. And then that's kind of what we're communicating from a high school side of things. So I'll turn it over to Trevor and let him talk more about the finances.
By the way, if anybody has ever had the opportunity to hear Rob speak before, that was literally the most condensed, fastest presentation he's ever given. So I got to commend him for that. My role today to really dispel some of the things that I hear over and over. And I feel like I have a really good sample size because I have private clients who've gone through this process. I see what the outcomes are. I see where they started from. So my excitement for this opportunity to share this with you is what I wanted to go over with you in the next few slides is actually what I talk about with my private clients in our meetings, and I never really get the opportunity to share this in a workshop setting. So I'm hoping that you'll start to just gather some tidbits from this and how I personally feel colleges are going to start changing the way that they are marketing themselves, how they start to reach out to families, and what this all means. Because a lot of the things that I see from students all the time is, they'll ask me a question like, what is that perfect score that I need to get in order for a school to really recognize my ability? Or what are the activities that really stand out to a college that makes me shine in this application process? Or a parent might ask me, if I file for financial aid, does that hurt my child's chances of getting into a college? Because now they see that we need financial aid. So these are all great questions. These are things I come across every day. And I do feel like because the landscape is changing with colleges and how they're awarding financial aid, it's something to really kind of get a grasp of. So Eric, we can go to the next slide. Real quick stats, don't want to spend too much time on this, but yep, University of Michigan is anticipating total losses this year of anywhere between $400 million to $1 billion. It's just staggering. If we go to the next slide, we're going to notice that the University of California system, in March alone, this was their losses that they realized. And a lot of this is due because they have to refund, in some cases, the housing, the meal plans, and this is a big revenue stream that a lot of these universities rely on. So by and large, their endowments are being hurt. And the ones that are being hurt the most, and Rob mentioned this briefly, are the smaller schools, the ones that really rely on the tuition revenue. And what I'm going to share with you is this system called enrollment management. But I think that there's something more important than these statistics. So Eric, if you don't mind going to the next slide. The huge loss of revenue from international students. And this is tremendous loss for a lot of these schools because they rely on this population, which they call full pay families. So lost revenue from international students is about 2.5 billion. Next slide, Eric, if you could. To me, it didn't show up on this slide, but I'm going to share with you what these facts are. And to me, these are the most important facts. Graduates today are starting families later in life. They're carrying this debt into their careers that are burdening them from either buying their first home, really starting the essence of what we feel it is to be an American and have that dream home. But this is literally what's happening. And I feel like a lot of families are walking into this blindly, just assuming that, college is going to award them some type of financial aid and hopefully you'll get into the right school. But to me, if you can really try to position yourself in a way for undergraduate education where you don't have to borrow through the nose, this is where you're going to end up better off. Maybe you'll graduate and you'll have a success story and start your family sooner. And this is, to me, why I take my job so seriously, is because I feel that a lot of families might not be getting the best information. But if we can go to the next slide, Eric, is there a possibility that we're going to see lower tuition? Here's the reality: 17% plan on taking a gap year this year. And like I just said from the last slide, that's a lot of tuition revenue that these colleges are going to miss out on. 20% of colleges are at risk of closing. So there's this book called the College Stress Test. And this is something that is very prevalent. They did a survey. They thought that before writing this book, there was about 10% of schools that would be closing. Now they anticipate closer to 20%. But there is an anticipation that pressure from students and parents about making tuition reasonable based on these times will have a reset in some way for tuition. Now, this won't happen all over the board, but as I'll show in my next slide, there are things that are trending this way. Enrollment management in a nutshell. So you have to understand that colleges do employ measurements from consulting firms that help them really invest resources in the best way so that they can attract the right students to come to their school. And it's just the fit for the program. And it helps schools become more revenue efficient. They're going to have more net tuition at the end of the day, which means that they have more operating revenue to provide students with better educational experiences. But these are some of the things that I feel parents, you should be on the lookout for, because these are things that colleges are looking for. Student characteristics, such as initiative, environmental factors like demographic trends or labor market trends. I feel like it's very important if families, you get on the same page, both student and parent, you look at some of the trends of what's happening with different industries. Look at the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, see what's happening over the next 10 years. And maybe that's a good way for you to engage in conversation with your student about what are some majors that you can actually get excited about in college. Because the institutions have goals as well, and they want you to flourish once you graduate from their school, because if you graduate, you get a good job, you do something great in society, that obviously looks really good on the institution that you graduated from. If we can go to the next one. Sorry, this is a little displaced, so you can't see exactly here, but in a nutshell, colleges will design enrollment management in a way to create a student population that is a robust population from different socioeconomic backgrounds, but they're also looking at it from different learning experiences. The most simplistic way I could explain enrollment management in 2 minutes is look at it from a grid standpoint. You have high achieving students, you have not as high achieving students, and then you have the family's ability to pay on our y-axis. Now, what you'll notice is on the top left corner, you see where I put a discount zone. And this is what colleges are willing to do to provide families with some type of tuition discounts, because they recognize that family or student as a great fit for their school. And obviously, the more high achieving students they could enroll, the better their statistics look, which is ranking related. But understand that discounts happen all the time. So even if you feel like you make too much income to qualify for financial aid, as long as you apply to the right schools where you'd be considered in their higher percentage of incoming students, there's most likely going to be a discount there for you. Now, on the opposite side of this, on the right-hand side, where we have the lower achieving students, you will kind of see that colleges do pull in full pay families from this. So there is a balancing act. There are families that receive full rides or close to it, but there's also families who pay full price. And this is like any business. They need to have revenue to be able to support the rest of their student population as well. Go ahead into the next slide, if you will, please. How many times have I heard from a student, I got this mailer from a school that I've literally never heard of before, so I just threw it in the other room and I've never opened it. It happens all the time. Now, colleges do their best to try to market or send out information to students around the United States to get them excited or get to know about their school. And so this is the reason why you might be getting bombarded in the mail with all these different flyers, because, hey, you might not have ever done a Google search for them, so they want to reach out to you. Now, this is the point where they actually start tracking what's called demonstrated interest. And colleges and enrollment management pay very particular attention to, are you actually picking up the phone or doing things that show the school, visiting their campus, that there's a higher likelihood that if they accept you, you're going to say yes, because you're a good fit for their program. And that comes down to their admission yield. So if you just understand a couple of the terms, admission yield is a very important thing that you should just be cognizant of. And then if we can go to the next slide, please. Institutional image. So by the time you graduate, have you ever done a Google search on a college like Claremont McKenna, and you might see some of their prominent alumni that have graduated? This is going back to institutional image. What kind of image are you going to give the school once you graduate? What kind of important things might you do in society? Go ahead and go to the next one. So this is something that I thought was worth sharing, growing tuition discount rates. So you notice trending from 2005-2006 school year, there's been an upward trend in tuition discounting for schools. And you can see that as evident from this chart that I put here. Now, there's something pretty interesting that Matthew Ward from Cal Lutheran Enrollment Management said. He said, lots of institutions can buy themselves classes where you put a particular amount of aid on the table to try to influence a single year's results. Something similar to what Rob was saying. What is this institution's goals this year? Are they trying to increase retention rates? Do they want to achieve higher rankings in the ranking reports that families read? Every school has a moving target. So sometimes a college might send out a notice that says, no application fee, no essay needed, just apply to our school, which is great, and you should take them up on that. But obviously, what does that do on the other side? Colleges get all these additional inflow of applications where now they become more selective because they actually get to turn away that many more students. Now, that's not obviously the reason why they're doing it, but they want to get students excited about applying to their school. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Graduates achieve success. Now, the best thing that colleges and universities can do to help name recognition is this last bullet point. Focus on the fundamentals of superb teaching and learning leads to the best marketing for a school. This is why we think USC is such a great school, because we understand that their alumni do very great things. So this is important for schools to really achieve educational success so that you as an alum might give back to the school, promote the school in some way that they're looking for. And then lastly, I think I have one more slide. Are you applying to the right schools? And so this is just something that I feel is important for you as a student to know. If you are applying to the schools that you're a good fit, they'll recognize that through your essays and through your supplemental essays. And this is where supplemental essays really come into play. How well do you fit with the culture of the school and the brand? So I probably would suggest for most students to understand what is the school's mission statement and do you fit what they're looking for? With that, I don't want to take too much time away from our esteemed colleague, Kirk Brennan, so I will end with that. I hope that this was helpful for some of you. I can give you out these slides too. I do have a few more that I didn't get a chance to go over, but this was important for me to at least share because enrollment management is a big piece of what drives admissions and their financial aid decisions. So thank you for letting me share that with you.
Thanks, Trevor. And thanks, Eric and Rob, for teeing it up here. I feel like I should first encourage attendees to take a breath. Colleges will still be around, and we still want you, and we need you. In fact, we're nothing without you. We will disappear if we don't have you. And I know students often worry about getting in and figuring out the way to crack the code. And you might be afraid of not getting into the place that you want, or getting into a place that you like, or getting in anywhere at all and having no future whatsoever. That's not actually going to happen. We colleges are also afraid that you won't be interested in us, that you won't apply if you start an application, that you won't finish it, or that if you get in, you won't accept our offer, that you'll accept the offer of a competing school. So we think of ourselves as institutions that are competing against each other for you. And I think it might be helpful for you to remember that if you ever start to feel afraid of getting in. Make a good plan, make a smart plan, use the benefit of your counselors to spin the odds, I guess, in your favor, and make sure that you have options and that you can afford those options and that you have an understanding of what is next. And trust me, we are going to fight over you until the day you walk up onto our campuses, because we value you. So don't think of us as gatekeepers, think of us as standing at the gates waiting to welcome you. And I hope that advice will bring some calm and peace to a process that is stressful enough without the uncertainties before us all today. I want to talk a bit about the general landscape that we're thinking about at the moment, and how USC has responded to that, and also what we're looking for, which in my view hasn't really changed, although the way we think about it might change given the short-term situation we're all sitting in. Colleges have been worried about change since before the pandemic broke. For several years, the federal government has been threatening to take action against the Association of College Admission Counseling, which we're a member of. Most colleges are members. They found that some of practices that colleges felt were put forward in the best interest of students might actually be restricting competition and therefore hurting the consumer. I don't think we should think of this as a consumer-oriented transaction, although many of the tenets apply. So some rules were wiped off the books this year that were going to change the way colleges thought about admission anyway. And now that the pandemic is before us, we are thinking about so many different factors that are changing, some of which have been mentioned already. Part of our job is to predict behavior. I have to enroll a certain number of students. Therefore, I have to admit a certain number of students. I have to predict the percentage of students who will accept that offer. And there are many factors that go into that. How strong a student's grades and test scores are might be a factor. As students are getting into other places, they might have more choices. The majors a student applying for helps us predict that behavior. If I admit a student to the cinema school, the school that many think is the best in the world, that student is likely to come at a rate that's higher than if I admit a student to a school that has many more choices. To a program where there are many more choices. So those are the kinds of things that we think about in predicting behavior, so that on the first day of classes, we have the right number of people there. But the kinds of things that are changing, though, that are going to affect our ability to predict this behavior, that make us college admission people very nervous, are along the lines that we've talked about. We don't know what the fall is going to look like. We don't know what the mode of instruction is going to look like. Is it going to be online? Is it going to be partially online? Is it going to be fully in person without any online component? I think most people agree that we're going to see some combination of online things in all different parts of our world, let alone education. Some colleges are concerned about housing. Dining halls and housing facilities are not conducive to social distancing, and so we're concerned about what questions might be looming on students' minds about where they will live and if they will be at risk, and just general campus life. Rob mentioned the football season. I'm a big fan of college football and the way athletics brings a community together. And I think a lot of first-year students are excited to experience that for the first time and really engage in the community. And community is a big part of what we're building and fostering and nurturing. All of those things are in question, which might affect the decision that students as consumers make moving forward. So as factors change that will change the behavior of the population that we're working with, these students who've committed or who we've admitted, then we get nervous about being able to predict behavior. Other things that are changing: international students, 15% of our entering first years are from are citizens of other countries and require a visa, and might need to require a flight to get into the country, and might need to be able to receive paper in the mail, all of which is under threat. And 40% of graduate students in some programs are international. The ability to travel or the willingness to travel. Right now, airlines have reduced their coverage, and as Rob mentioned, families may be less willing to go elsewhere. I am hearing from students who are enrolled elsewhere who want to return home and transfer into USC after having been else at another terrific college for a couple of years, and so students are thinking about changing their plans. Spring grades is another thing. Your current school situation all vary. I expect that we'll see the scars of this pandemic on academic transcripts for at least 4 years for high school transcripts, and maybe for a longer time for transfer students, as the spring 2020 grades might have more pass, no pass grades, might have more missing grades or incomplete grades, or just classes that have been erased from a record, or those transcripts will be changing. Lots of change on that will affect admission and students' behavior. The financial situation of the country is changing. Unemployment is rising. The markets are shifting. Comfort and safety are at risk, and the ability to afford college is becoming a question. It reminds me of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maybe you remember in your psychology class, or maybe you'll take this next year, juniors. We have this concept of the hierarchy of needs, where we focus first on our basic needs like food and clothing and shelter and safety and health. And when we have those, we can advance to more important needs like social needs and emotional needs, belonging and self-esteem. And when we can get to a fully actualized sense of purpose, we've achieved the highest level of this pyramid, if you think. I think it's helpful to think about this, because I feel like right now we're retreating from more advanced level needs on this hierarchy. We're worried about toilet paper and food in ways that we haven't had to as a community for a long time, at least most of us. And perhaps it's helpful to remember that, and I really like Eric's point about reviewing our values and remembering what's very important. And I would hope that we would also not forget about our plans to advance and achieve that kind of self-actualization. That's that personal sense of fulfillment that we all desire. And as we feel these threats about travel, about safety, about health, about finances, about jobs, we may be retreating also personally in our own emotional growth. Students' plans are also changing. You might have wanted to play sports this spring and make videos of your achievements to show coaches for recruiting purposes, or participate in those clubs or charitable organizations that you thought would be the most important part of your application. Those things are changing now. You have to worry about how to talk about yourself in a different way, students to admission offices. And test scores are changing. Many tests were not able to be offered this spring, as is very common. And some tests are being moved to an online mode, so policies are changing. Credit might be changing. There's a lot of fear surrounding all of these things. All of these factors come to mind. I'm sure I'm missing many others about that have to do with a student's ability to choose to attend a university like USC or anywhere around the country. The way we have responded to all of this uncertainty, a couple of ideas come to mind. First of all, as this broke, we were just about ready to finish our admission offers. We tend to notify most applicants of our decision in late March. It was a March 13th where we were called to stay home in the state of California. And so we changed plans. We wondered if this pandemic situation should change our admission strategy, and we did. We chose to admit more students up front. Our typical strategy has been to admit too few and then creep up to our enrollment targets so that we don't go over enrollments. And we've been very attentive to hitting a specific number and not going over that number. And in some ways, being a bit short of that was better for the various goals that we had as an institution. This year, with so many question marks, we decided to return to a strategy that we had a couple of years ago of admitting more students up front and relying less on, not our waiting, we don't have a waiting list, but there's a similar process at USC where we start students in January and we can move them, invite them to start earlier if there's room. So we went ahead and admitted more students this year. So if you were to dig back through the history, you'll notice that our admission rate, while still very selective, retreated to a way that was was more accustomed, that feels like more of that of a few years ago for us. We're not tracking the kind of demonstrated interest activities, so I would hope that students would not worry about things that they can't control. We're keeping track of how many people show up to our programs. It's more so we can predict how many cookies to buy rather than how many of those students might be enrolling. We want to keep track of just numbers and general interest for just general record keeping and resource allocation purposes. We did decide to go test optional for the current class of high school juniors. So if you're a 2021 grad, we do not require an SAT or ACT of students. There are some exceptions to that. We're recommending students who attend a non-accredited school or homeschool to send some form of externally evaluated mark. If it's a test score or a grade in a college class or AP scores, we're going to recommend that. Lots of schools are changing their test optional policies or test requirements. This is something you're going to have to look into very carefully, as some schools are doing this for 1 year or for 2 years or for 3 years or permanently. Some schools are not considering tests. Some schools are considering tests if you turn them in. We will consider tests. We just made this decision. It's brand new. We were not considering going test optional before this event, and because of the lack of availability of test sittings here this spring and the uncertainty as we move forward, we wanted to remove that question mark on students' mind. And lots of schools are doing this, and we don't want to be missing out on the opportunity to enroll great students who choose to avail themselves of that option. So we are going to go test optional for 1 year, and at the end of that year, we'll reevaluate and decide if that should move forward. And in the past, we've found tests to be a valuable predictor of success. I know many schools have published that they do not find that to be valuable, but in our research, our internal data shows that that tests add significant value to our ability to predict a student's success in our environment, which is why we require them. I think any college who requires tests should do that kind of research, and so I'm nervous about that. I don't know what that looks like. I have not had to make a decision without those for a long time. We did not require tests of all applicants until a few years ago, so we're accustomed to making decisions without information. You're cocking your head, Eric. We did not require SATs or ACTs of international students, where those were less available and where other kinds of tests were more commonly issued to students. So we didn't require those, but they were optional for international students until several years ago. So we're accustomed to deciding things without all of the information that we have at hand. But like any group of people making a decision, you want the questions answered that you have. And I think Rob's advice is good. If you feel good about your score, turn it in. It's up to you. We're not going to give advice to students about whether or not they should, but if students want to turn that in, they should. If they don't want to, they should not. We're going to feel comfortable making a decision either way. We did also review our test policies. The College Board and International Baccalaureate Organization, as well as the credit granting organizations in the UK, have changed how they're going to be issuing final grades for the cumulative assessments that they issue. And we did choose to preserve the credit that we would grant for those exams, even though the mode of those assessments is going to be very different. We trust those organizations to adhere to their typical standards. We were a little nervous about that. I do hope that students feel ready to advance to the next level of courses that they get to by taking some of those tests. I would hope that students feel comfortable retreating on those if they feel they've been placed in over their head. The other thing that has changed a lot is our ability to recruit students. One of the most important things that we have to offer is to show you our amazing campus. The environment at USC's campus is very exciting. It's a beautiful place. It's a spirited place. And I'm nervous that this will not allow us to be as competitive in the marketplace for your attendance. We know that when students visit our campus, they're more likely to enroll because of the kind of picture you see behind me. It's a beautiful place. I think it's one that will inspire you to be your best and make you feel at home for a long time, even after you're gone. So we're very nervous about that. So we've, like so many things, have transitioned a lot of our efforts to online. We hope that that's an engaging experience and shows you what's unique about USC. So do try to visit. Definitely follow schools on social media. I think you'll see more and more Instagram stories and Snapchat stories, and maybe even TikTok soon enough as the next platforms take off. Financial aid is definitely a question. I don't know that we have too much time to talk about this, but the general financial aid process is designed to give students an individualized price. The price that we publish is a price that a minimum of students pay. About a third of USC students pay that price. The remainder get a personalized price based on that application for financial aid. That application is based on the FAFSA, which is 2 years ago data. At USC, it's also based on the CSS profile form, which is based on 1 year ago data. None of that stuff is about right now data that might be very different for families. So students should also be prepared to file an appeal for financial aid after they receive their financial aid award. If some circumstances have changed dramatically in a student's life, the financial aid process is able to react to localized, temporary change, or even change that appears to be projecting out more permanently for some families. So apply for aid if you feel you need assistance. Students don't always realize that it might be cheaper to attend a school that looks more expensive based on your family's ability to pay. I'm very proud that 20% of our entering students this year are the first generation in their family to go to college. I think that has a lot to do with the affordability initiative that our president announced earlier this year about our commitment to provide more financial aid to low-income students to make sure that our community is as diverse as possible in as many aspects as possible, and that we are remaining at the lead of educating the next generation of leaders that this country so needs. That's my main concern about this pandemic, is that you students, the next generation of leaders, will choose to take time away from marching towards that goal of becoming the next generation of leaders. We may see a slowdown in our development as a society if you choose to take a year off. I think a year off can be very valuable. As long as you're marching towards a goal that's important. I think if we're retreating in fear, we may not be making the best decision for ourselves. What hasn't changed is our need for great students. We're looking for great students who will engage with each other, who will be willing to learn from each other, and want to teach each other, want to share, and want to listen, and ultimately be ready to accept the challenge of having their perspective tested. You come to college with an experience, a set of life experiences that gives you a perspective, and we're going to surround you with people from all over the world, from all different walks, that will challenge that. We're going to put you in a rigorous environment, encourage you to engage with others to test that. You're going to come out with a better understanding of truth, a stronger ability to solve the tough problems that our world needs, and we want you to do that. We're going to have to figure out new ways to hear that from you. We know that the spring means a different change. Your perspective may be focused on the short-term problems at hand, and that's okay. Tell us your authentic truth. Worry less about what you think we're looking for in the college application, and worry more about who you are, what's important to you, what your goals and dreams are. And then how can a university help you achieve those dreams? Those are the questions of the application. It's the same question of every application. Who are you? What's important to you? What are your goals? How can we help you get there? If you start thinking about those kinds of questions in a forward-thinking way that is more reflective of your goals and your dreams of personal fulfillment, you'll write a stronger application and you'll tell us a more compelling story. You'll be a stronger applicant at every college to which you apply. If you think in those terms, worry not about what I want to hear. All I want to hear is what you have to say. But too many students don't have any answers to those questions. So think about those questions. Look for lessons in the struggle. Right now, we're all struggling. We can choose to worry and fret, or we can choose to look ahead and seek ways to find lessons in the challenge. I think student athletes understand this best. When you're trying to break your personal best time or jump over something higher that you've never been able to jump over before, we work hard, we struggle, and one day we're able to succeed at that. I think this is why we have athletics at universities, so that all of us can observe how hard work, how persistence, and lessons learned through struggle can apply to even calculus. That's all I have to say. Hopefully we have a little more time for questions, and I want to thank you all for attending the program.
So, Kirk, can I ask you just one question as we kind of finish out the Q&A stuff?
Sure.
With the ACT, if things go back to normal and we have opportunities to take tests and all this stuff, with ACT's opportunity to take subsections or to take parts of the ACT in a sitting, what are you seeing as maybe USC's response, but what are you seeing overall as how people are responding to the individual subsections versus the overall one-time sitting of all four?
I see that as a way for ACT to regain market share that it's lost, not as a tool for students to necessarily put their best foot forward. We have not reviewed that policy just yet, although I suspect that we will as we approach the next application cycle. We currently accept the best composite sitting. ACT has recently changed their advice on what some call super scoring or taking the best individual subsections. My understanding is that doing so might cost us some validity, but with so many things up in the air, we may also have to review that question.
Trevor, there was a number of questions on tuition, and what are you seeing, and what are you kind of perspective on will colleges discount tuition in the future? What are you seeing, and maybe just some trends or projections as you look at costs and what colleges will do, and will they, if they do go back to remote learning, will they kind of cut prices completely?
Yeah. So one of the things that Kirk mentioned, which was be prepared to file an appeal, which I think is strong advice. I just took one of our families through the process with another private institution, and just given them the reality of what's happening, they offered them another $20,000 over 4 years. So that they'll lend an ear and they'll try to understand what is happening. What I would say is there is a specific number that colleges have, which is their operating expense to educate a student. And they know what their net tuition revenue needs to be in order to still be profitable. So I feel, and what I've been recognizing from my own sample size from my families, is there are schools that are willing to put a little bit more on the table for the student because they still know that they're operating in a profit margin. And in order for them to keep their doors open, and this might not be true for USC because they have the demand, but there will be other schools that, I just read something today that there's still 700 colleges that have room available for the fall semester, which tells you that they still need to fill in their seats, and they'll give tuition discounts left and right. And I think it's incumbent upon the student and the parent to really get on the same page, something that I really try to preach. What is your goal as a family? And what is your upper limit of how much you really want to spend? And I feel it's important to just check out those net price calculators that every college has.
I'll leave this open to the group, Rob, Kirk. If international students, I guess two questions that were asked quite a bit. If international students aren't able to come back to the United States, and I think, Trevor, you put up that number that was pretty significant, about 17% of students. our international students. If they're not, how does that impact domestic? My guess is it opens it up wide. And then the other question is, if my school's gone to pass, fail, credit, no credit, just even grades for this semester and learning for this semester, like how is that going to be judged?
Kirk, you want to take the first swing at this one?
One of my biggest fears is that international students won't be able to enroll. International students bring a great deal of experience and enrich the campus community in ways that benefit everybody. And I think that we would all, as a nation, be at a terrible loss if we could not experience a global culture that a university community can provide. I'm not as worried that won't be possible. The government has already taken steps to make it easier for students to achieve their student visas, to gain a student visa. And I think it's pretty clear that the government is going to make this a priority. And we also don't know where an international student is necessarily living. Although we might know that they are attending school in a certain country, or residents of a certain country, or citizens of a certain country, all of which are different variables. Many are attending U.S. high schools and are still staying in the country with their home state parents. So we don't really know who can't get here, even if for some reason there remains, we see travel restrictions remaining. I imagine we'll see a lot of shifting of admission terms, but I have no real idea about that.
The second part was on pass, no pass, or A through F grading this term. And again, I'll give Kirk the opportunity if he wants it, but my take is pretty straightforward. If you are a student who has a history of getting A's, and you come to this term and you have pass because that's what your school is offering, that doesn't really say anything about what you have accomplished in this term. So my guess is, in that pass, no pass universe, if there's no passes, there's going to be a problem, and colleges are going to want an explanation as to what went wrong and why. If it's a series of passes, I believe it doesn't tell enough of the story, so there'll be a greater reliance on the first semester 11th grade, the entirety of 10th grade, and if you're applying regular decision, the first semester of 12th grade could factor in more heavily than your pass, no pass situation. Even with grades this term, I think there's a realization that this is not standard operating procedure. And even if you are earning great grades, what does that mean in the context of the overall education? The answer is it totally depends on your high school. So a certain amount of this is going to come down to the quality of the education. And that's kind of a case-by-case basis.
Another common application has announced that they'll be adding questions specifically about how a student or a school has dealt with COVID-19. I don't know yet how that's shaking out, but I'm very eager to hear that news. To us, that there are two questions: what did the school do? What were the school's policies and the choices that were given to students? And then two, why did a student make that choice, or what circumstances were in that student's life surrounding this situation? Was health a particular challenge for you and your family? What about job? What about safety? How did you experience this situation with respect to what your school gave you in terms of choices? Did you have access to technology or not to attend school? I have a good friend who's a math teacher up the street. He says a third of his students haven't reported since the stay-at-home order. That breaks my heart and signals a real risk to our community that maybe a significant portion of his students aren't able to move forward. So we want to hear those stories and are going to be human about this. We're people who make decisions that we think are going to benefit both parties, the student as well as the institution, and we'll continue to do that.
Kirk, I really appreciate that comment, because I think one of the biggest things that I've seen in this process is really the humanization of the relationships, even via distances or even via the technology and those types of things. I'm wondering, I'm going to throw this out there for anybody. What do we know about SAT subject tests? Like, so people are going test optional. Like, is that something I should even worry myself about? I mean, I know fewer and fewer. I mean, I don't even think there's the last few schools that required them got rid of the requirement. So Rob, Trevor, maybe I ask you that question overall is like, what are you advising your students when it comes to subject tests? Because people can, in my experience, especially in the Bay Area, they can overdo it with some of that stuff.
My advice would be, number one, there are exactly 0 schools in the United States that now require, hard and fast require SAT subject tests for admission to a general program. Could there be an exception within a specific program like a College of Engineering? Yes, that can happen. So if there's a compelling reason for you to take a subject test, A, you're applying to a highly selective school, B, you're applying to a highly selective major within that highly selective school, that you can use an SAT subject test to verify specific knowledge, i.e., I'm going to declare a major in material science or mechanical engineering, and I want to show a really strong math level 2 and a really strong physics score to verify that, hey, I know my stuff. Even against the sharpest students in the nation, I'm at the top of the food chain. That's a really small percentage of students. So if there's a compelling reason and we can take the exams, or maybe we've already taken the exams, great. But I wouldn't lose my mind over it either. It's such a small sect of schools and programs that it's really on a sort of an individualized basis, but I would imagine the overwhelming number of students are not going to need them. That said, it's kind of like having a really strong SAT or ACT score to test optional school. I'd rather have the bullets in my gun than carrying an empty gun. That might not be a great analogy, but I think you know where I'm going with this. So if you have the ability to take the subject test and it's germane to your major, and you think it would benefit at a school that up until very recently was looking at these subject tests and are still considering them. There are some schools that completely took them off the table. So you want to make sure you're clear. Is it an optional? Is it a recommended? Or is it we do not consider these tests? So make sure you know what you're doing before you just jump in with both feet and not look at how you might use that time more effectively. Because remember, at the end of the day, you can't take the SAT and the SAT subject tests on the same day. Your brain will explode. It's very messy. You have to push through your guts. Nobody wants that. It won't let you do it. So don't try. And if you need an SAT score, frankly, that is more important than any school subject test recommendations.
Guys, thanks so much. Quick question, Rob and Trevor. There were some questions. Rob, you mentioned some of the things is, I think through email, people will be able to get in touch with you. But there was a question, are you coming up to Northern California and doing anything up there, this next year?
Okay, so number one, in person, I have families all over the state, and up until COVID-19, I met with each and every one of them in person. I would fly up to the Bay Area and meet with them in their homes. That is not likely to occur at least for a few more months. My wife, for those of you who know me, my wife's a type 1 diabetic. I am not, under any circumstances, rolling the dice on her health and her well-being to make an extra buck. It's not happening. So if there's a school out there that wants me to give a presentation and they want to host it via Google Classroom or Zoom, done deal, it's free, I'm glad to do it. If there's a family out there, they want a free consultation, they want to talk with me and decide is it something they need help with that I can help with, gladly we'll have a Zoom conversation, a phone call on the house, glad to cover it, my pleasure. Am I planning on being in the Bay Area anytime between now and say the start of fall instruction? No.
So Trevor, I guess you're coming up.
I'll be there, yes.
Yeah, nobody's getting into the Bay Area anyhow. Northern California, we've completely shut down, they're checking roads. Kirk, can I ask a question? And maybe this is where we'll close. And this is just kind of I'm a high school counselor. My kids are nervous. They're anxious. You did a great job in kind of sharing, hey, listen, we care about you. What would be maybe a couple of the things that the kids can do now, especially if they're a junior, that would say, hey, you know what, here's a couple tips as you get ready for the summer, knowing that we don't know much about what's maybe coming?
Boy, I think, I mean, my advice goes to much bigger questions. Don't worry, take care of yourself. It's okay to be off right now. We're all off, we're all struggling. And don't worry about appearing to be perfect for a college admission office. We're not going to expect that of ourselves, and certainly not of you students. I would hope that among the lessons that we can draw from this is the ability to practice mindfulness, to pay attention to our mental health, and to struggle with uncertainty. We live in an age when we have as much information as any generation before us. And so I think we're accustomed to making decisions with lots of facts and lots of information. And those of us who run organizations are accustomed to making decisions without all the data that we want. And we have to do that more and more now. And that's actually a valuable skill, to have a lack of information in a decision-making environment is still very helpful. We colleges understand, we get that this is not the usual spring 2020 is going to be a thing we see for you. It's not the usual mode of education, and that we're going to give you a pass on a stumble this time around. Be strong, do your best, and don't worry if you haven't done your best. We all struggle. We all have to get back up, and that's okay. I think it might be helpful to take some notes about your values. I really like your advice, Eric, about rethinking about what's important. I think we've all got a little more time to do this, but we're also learning a new routine that's taking up that time. I think we should resist avoiding big questions like what's important, why are we going forward, how do we want to, what steps do I need to take to achieve my goals? And I believe that if you do that kind of reflection and take the opportunity to think about what's important to you, that you're going to write a strong application and have a lot of schools fighting over you, and that this is going to get better. We're going to get through this. We're going to get past it. And we'll be talking about this for generations, about the pandemic of 2020, and you'll be telling your grandkids stories about what it was like. Let's take those notes. I think those will be valuable stories coming down the line.
Guys, thanks so much.